Good morning, ma'am. This is Vishud of BMS Marketing 3C. My roll number is 19219, and today I'll be presenting the presentation on powers and functions of Board of Directors of Sebi. All right. So starting with a little bit of introduction about what SEBI is. So SEBI is a regulatory body of the Government of India established on 12th April 1992 under the SEBI Act of 1992. It is headquartered at Mumbai, in Maharashtra, India. And so to say that the Chapter 4 of SEBI Securities and Exchange Board of India Act 1992 particularly talks about the power and the functions that it provides to the board. Now, coming to the main objective of SEBI, uh, that is, it is to control and regulate the capital market and to ensure that the Indian capital market works systematically. So now this will provide investors with a transparent environment and also promotes development of the capital markets overall. Now, moving on to the management and the structure of SEBI. SEBI has a hierarchical structure which comprises of various departments which are managed by the respective department heads, and certain departments such as corporate finance department, human resources, investment management, derivatives, commodity derivatives, international affairs, economic and policy analysis, debt and hybrid securities, and there are many other more departments which are there in SEBI, and the management thereof consists of a chairman, which is appointed by the central government. Then there are two members from amongst the officials, which are from the ministry of the central government and particularly dealing with finance. So to say, they are from the Ministry of Finance. Then we have one member from the official, which is an official from the Reserve Bank of India, and there are five more members who are also appointed by the central government. Now, talking about the board of directors or the board in general, uh, so these are the senior management of SEBI, which consists and are appointed by different government organizations. So as I explained that how Union Government or the Central Government of India nominates the chairman of the SEBI and other from the Ministry of Finance, from Reserve Bank of India, and other five more members appointed by the government. So the general superintendent's direction and management affair of the board vests with the board of members, and the chairman also has the powers of general superintendence and direction of the affairs of the board, and may also exercise all the powers as stated above. So this is what a board is basically there for. So now the major role for SEBI, if comes to explain, and the board in general, that what the major role of board is, it is that it is, first of all, it acts as the issuer of the security. So SEBI ensures that the issuance of the IPO and FPO takes place in a healthy and transparent manner, and IPO is the fresh issuance of shares of a company in the stock market, and hence SEBI needs to ensure that that is happening in a very transparent manner. Second is that SEBI acts as a protector for both the traders and the investors. So it is the responsibility of SEBI to safeguard the interests of the investors and ensure that investors are not ill-treated or become a victim of the hands by the hands of the stock market fraud. Another major role of SEBI is to act as a financial intermediary. So the body acts as an intermediate in the stock market to ensure that all the market transactions take place smoothly, and it also monitors the activities of the financial intermediaries such as the broker, sub-broker, NBFCs, etc. And along with this, SEBI also acts as the prohibition of the inner trade in securities, which is the insider trading or the other unfair practices that can be taken place in in a security market. Now, moving on to the functions of SEBI, we can divide the SEBI's function primarily into three parts. First is the protective function, second is the regulatory function, and third is the development function. So, when we say functions of SEBI, we also mean the functions of the board of directors or the powers and the functions of the board. So now the major and the foremost function, to put it in a definition manner, would be to subject to the provisions of this act. It shall be the duty of the board of the Sebi to protect the interests of investors in securities and to also promote the development of and to regulate the securities market by such measures as it thinks fit. So moving on to the basic functioning, or talking about the protective functions. So as the name obviously suggests in itself, protective functions are carried out by SEBI to protect the investors' interests and other financial participants like other stakeholders, like price rigging, promoting fair practices, to create consciousness among the investors and prohibit the fraudulent activities and unfair trade practices. Now, moving on to regulatory functions, the objective behind performing these functions is to keep a check on the business of the financial markets work function. These functions include, but are obviously not limited to, uh, such as registration of the brokers, levying the fees, regulate and register the credit rating agency, implementing and exercising powers, regulating the takeover of companies, framing the code of conduct and the guidelines thereof for the proper function and the of the corporate in general and the financial intermediaries required, to also conduct inquiries and talk about the audit and conduct the audit of exchanges time to time. So these are the major regulatory functions. Moving on to the development functions. The development functions performed by the SEBI includes, but are not limited to, of course, conveying training to intermediaries, promote fair trading and reduce malpractices, buying and selling of mutual funds from AMCs via broker, carrying out the research work, encouragement of the self-operating enterprises, etc. Thereof. Now, moving on to the powers of SEBI, these can be categorized into three broad categories: quasi judicial, quasi executive, and legislative. So, in judicial, to ensure fairness, transparency, and accountability in the securities market, SEBI has the power, or the board has the power, to deliver judgments related to any kind of fraud and other unethical practices in terms of securities market. It includes the drafting of the legislature pertaining to the capital markets. Now, in the executive side of things, SEBI has the power to implement the regulations and judgments and take legal actions against the violators. Also, the board is authorized to inspect books of accounts and other documents if it violates the regulations. And in the legislative end, SEBI has the right to frame the rules and regulations to protect the interests of the investors, which I've also talked about in the functions, because it consists of insider trading regulations, listing obligations, and disclosure requirements. Now, talking about powers and functions, there are also other mutual fund regulation provided by the SEBI, uh, which are as follows. So we will not dive deep into this as our topic is limited to functions and powers of SEBI, but to cover it overall, SEBI says that any group of company which includes the asset management company of a fund cannot hold 10% or more of the shareholding and voting rights in the asset management company, and the asset management company cannot have the representation on a board of any other mutual fund. So all of these other set of frames are provided by SEBI for different departments, and there are many more regulations provided by SEBI to talk about in the mutual funds. Okay, so now coming on to the conclusion. So, SEBI is the body which is responsible for the efficient functioning of the share market of a country. And it is the role of the SEBI to keep an eye on the investors who invest their hard earned money in the share market, or which should not go in the waste, of course. Besides this, the powers of SEBI needs to go through the Securities Appellate Tribunal and the Supreme Court of India. So I think it's really important that the SEBI is existing in India and helping investors and other shareholders, brokers, and other officials time to time. And so these were the powers and the functions of SEBI. Thank you.